Welcome. In this lecture, I'm going to give you an introduction to what I'm calling the two-bucket outline. And this is an outline that's a little unique to what I teach, but it's universally applicable. It touches on some basic principles that all writers and all people involved in making media have to deal with. I'm going to move through this as rapidly as I can, and you can rewind and play it again if it seems to have gone by too fast. First part is the theory. I want to give you the theory behind this so that you'll understand then why the instructions and why the thing is set up the way it is. So this is part one. Conflict, physicality, specificity, these are the three elements, right? And I want to talk about those. So first I want to talk about conflict. I really believe, and many media makers will agree, that conflict is the engine for creating story. And again, I'm using story in a very big, wide, general sense. That, and to a lesser degree, contrast. And there may be another time when we'll talk a little bit more about contrast. Contrast is a kind of a lower temperature version of conflict. But let's deal with dramatic conflict right off. And conflict is all about two-ness. Two. So many people think that a story is about a thing, some really clever idea, some really unique person, or some really special event or action. But people that make stories for a living and who make media know that, in fact, the secret to all this is two-ness. So not only is this the secret to the final product and what makes the final piece engaging, but it's actually the secret to unlocking your creativity in creating that wonderful piece of media. Now, what's interesting is, as I view this in lots of students, is how resistant people are on a kind of a fundamental level to conflict. And it makes complete sense, right? Because, right, by the time you're pretty grown up, you realize, even not so grown up, you realize a good day is a day without conflict. We're kind of hardwired in our normal sort of life is to avoid conflict. Generally, that's not quite true, but mostly. A good day is when bad things don't happen, when drama is minimized for most people. So it's understandable why we, average sort of civilians who don't make stories why they don't make stories, because to make story you need conflict. Or contrast, but we're going to talk about conflict here. In our media, though, every one of us craves conflict, right? You can look at it in high conflict like war and murder and mayhem and destruction, or low-level conflict, the rubbing up against and the bumping up against characters in a drama. So as creators, we have to really internalize this ability to recognize and heighten and embrace and withstand the tension of conflict, because that's where the story really begins to cook. That's where characters really begin to come alive. That's where messages begin to take on depth and meaning and believability. It all happens in conflict. That's one way of looking at this. And conflict is the thing that makes our imagination take off, really. And how we present conflict will determine whether or not the viewer and our own imaginations embrace that conflict and are drawn in by it, or are repelled by it and want to turn it off, right? So in stories, very interesting, lots of amazing conflicts, horrible things, terrifying things, ugly things, mean-spirited things in conflict will attract us. Even mild-mannered people are attracted to such things, right? In life, not so. So I want to get at this, the core here. Now, a lot of people think that the best way to deal with conflict is to move forward and grab a great conflictual moment. That's what one needs. I need a great plot. I need a great heroic battle scene. I need an incredible moment of truth between two people. But in fact, that may lead you more times than not to coming up empty with an idea. In fact, what writers and creators, directors, producers do is they actually take a step backwards. And instead of leaping into the action, the fray, they step backwards and they try to separate out what are the two elements that are coming in conflict. Usually it's two characters, but it could be two elements, but two characters coming in conflict. And to very clearly evoke and bring to life each of these two elements or characters and build up their differences and their uniquenesses, and that starts and sets them in conflict, and then it's almost inevitable that they will produce a significant action. And the deal is that if you can be really thoughtful and authentic to what's the unique thing about this and what's the unique thing about that, then the resulting action that happens, that your imagination makes up, will probably be fresh and new and unique and have all the wonderful qualities that original work makes. So that's the first thing, conflict. And conflict is made up of two-ness. And it's very hard to do. Our brains are not hardwired well for making that. We love watching it and experiencing it, but making it is really tough. And this is what separates viewers from makers. So number 2, embodiment. We are physical beings, human beings. We are physical beings. There isn't a human being here that isn't a physical being. And media makers tell their stories through physicality. I know that many media makers will focus on their means of production, like they'll say, I'm a videographer, or I'm a studio recording engineer, or I produce broadcast television, or whatever, sports events. I do sports broadcasts. In fact, that's the medium, but the thing we really work with as media artists is we work with physicalities, representations of physicalities, either images of things and people and events and stuff, or sounds that have a physicality, the sound of a voice, the sound of an actual instrument, or even virtual kinds of physicalities, the unbelievable imaginative sounds and images and so on. But these things are physical. They're made up of colors and shapes. They exist at least in 2 dimensions, if not 3 or 4 dimensions. And they impact us because we're physical beings. Now this sounds like maybe you've heard this before and you know this is a no-brainer, but it's really important for people to understand when they're embarking in a media training, is to understand that it is terribly important to understand that cameras and microphones are a means to or their imagination and their tools to produce images and sounds are a means to access or to capture physical experience. And that the history of media making has been a history of more and more convincing, more and more amazing, more and more high fidelity physical experience, you know. Film stocks have gotten more sensitive, and now digital devices have gotten more sensitive so that we can produce color and image better. Sound has gotten higher quality. We've gone from monophonic to stereo to 5.1 surround sound and beyond. Images have gotten higher resolution and so on. That physicality we can refer to also as embodiment. The third thing I want to touch on is specificity, and that goes along with physicality most directly, right? And that is that we do best in our media, in our making, when we are most specific. That's not entirely always true, but it's generally true, and it will point you in a rich territory if you keep that in mind. So that, especially in this exercise, I'm going to demand that you be specific. I don't want you to use terms like a girl, if that's all you're going to say, an average girl, a typical girl. That's fine for real life, but for making media, we have to know something, use a term that's more specific. A little brat, you know, a tiny princess. Terribly important, that specificity. It is good and sometimes useful to think of yourself like a chef, even though we're making media, because there's something we know, everybody knows about people who do high cooking, right? And we know that they are doing these three things, that they are very, they are dealing with conflict. They're combining flavors that brush up against each other, textures and shapes, that they are being very physical. They're very demanding of the texture and the particular temperature and textures, and that they're being very specific about those physicalities. It has to be balsamic vinegar, or it has to be extra virgin olive oil. So as chefs, we can bring it down to earth, and I want to talk last about peanut butter and jelly in this first part. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That is a great embodiment, okay? Watch this. So we have peanuts that grow in the ground, you know, in the dirt underneath the ground, and they're kind of, you know, peanuts have a flavor of their own. But when you take peanuts and you grind them up, you get this incredible paste, this oily paste with some salt in it. You get peanut butter. And then let's talk about jelly, because jelly is grapes or strawberries or some fruit. Let's talk about grape jellies. And these are little round things, fruits that grow high on a vine, and they sweeten in the sun, and they get mashed and cooked and thickened into making this thing called jelly. And you put peanut butter and jelly. So we could call that a conflict. That's a contrast, but a conflict. These two unlikely things coming in contact with each other, and produces this extraordinary product, this extraordinary experience. And it's so terribly important that it not be sort of like peanut butter, and that it not be sort of like jelly. It's important that it be peanut butter and jelly coming together, and it's the particular peanut butter, whether it's creamy or smooth, and it's the particular jelly that you love, and they come together and they produce this experience. Peanut butter and jelly. So we'll get on to part 2. Look for the next video and slideshow to produce, and watch it right now after this, to get on with peanut butter, to get on with the 2-bucket assignment. Thanks.